He has done quite a few different things with his life. He's been a boxer, a pig farmer, a seminary student, a cotton mill worker, and the only white baseball player for a Negro League team. And then in his spare time, he received a PhD in literature with a concentration in the poetry of John Milton at the University of Utah. Dr. Lee was listed among the top 12 writers of all time by the Utah Endowment for the Humanities. He won the Mountains Plains Booksellers Award in poetry and Western States Book Award in poetry. He taught for many years down at SUU, where he earned every teaching award that the university gives, including being named the Professor of the Year on 3 separate occasions. And I'm sure he's embarrassed by all of these remarks, but get used to it. Okay, the first poet of Laureate of Utah, he received the Utah Governor's Award for Lifetime Achievement in the Arts. In 2000, he was shortlisted for Poet Laureate of the United States. He's the author of over 20 books of poetry. In 2004, his book, So Quietly the Earth, his literary memoir for the state of Utah, was selected for the New York Public Library's annual Books to Remember list. And his latest book, which he'll be hopefully discussing a little bit today, entitled Last Call, it was just recently released in August and has been nominated for the Pulitzer Prize and the National Book Award. Please join me in offering a warm welcome to Dave Lee.
Hello, Snow College. This is my 6th time to read here. Of course, I started reading here about 55 years ago, I think. This facility is just amazing. It was not even in the godmother's vision the last time I was on this campus. It was in an old building up on that part of the campus where you had to watch when you walked across the stage because there were soft spots, and if you were overweight, you could go in. This is quite a bit of a different situation for me. There's also something else that's really for me, not for you, but for me really poignant about this. This is the 3rd time in my writing career that I've had a new book come out, and my first college reading was on this campus. Now, I don't know what that's all about, but I am delighted by that. I think the last time I was here, Ron, we're thinking 13 years ago or something, I came with my big brother, best friend, Bill Clefcorn, and I won't embarrass some of your faculty named Ron by telling some of the escapades we engaged in while we were here, but it was a memorable time for all concerned. And I bring up Bill's name because he recently passed away, and he returned to talk with me when I was batching up on the Cascade River in Washington. And he said, "Well, Lee, isn't it about time we get to work on a memorial book for me?" And I said, "A memorial book?" And he said, "Well, not one for you yet. You're not dead. Someone else will have to do yours." And over about a 2-week period of time, he guided me into what became this new book, Last Call. So I'm really out on the first journey to introduce the book to the world, and you are my first college class, not only in Utah, but in the world. So I'm just delighted to kick it off, unless you all start booing and get up and walk out, and then I'll think, oh my, I should have gone to the wire somewhere, you know. Okay, I want to talk about Last Call for just a few minutes, and then give most of my time just to letting you hear some things from the poem, from the book, and then talk about it if you'd like to along the way. In some ways, this is the tightest book I've ever written. In many ways, it's structured as a novel. It starts at the crack of dawn in a little cafe somewhere on earth. It actually exists in this big hollow space between my ears. But there are 2 people who come in for morning libations. Then they get in a pickup, and they spend the entire day driving through the country, looking at the countryside and talking. And the book is one day in the life. It is symbolically the last day in a life. They end up at midnight for last call, back in the same little cafe, Billy, one of the characters, makes a big speech on his attitude toward the meaning of life and art, and then the book ends. What I'm going to do, because of limited time, I'm going to read 5 poems for you that will represent different aspects of the book. First of all, the pulse of the book is the drive I just described. It's both a macro and a microcosm of the life process, seen from the end, looking back on it, a discussion of what went on, what it may mean, what our hopes for. The pulse of the book, in many ways, I suppose, is going to be the poems that I'm best known for, character portraits in voices that epitomize the people that I'm dealing with. And what I'm trying to establish is a specific place, and the fact that by setting confining us, it defines us. We think, we speak, we believe, we behave as much as a result of where we are as who we are. And I'd like to establish that. And then the spine of the book that I'm not going to be able to work with on you, these are the poems that Cliff Corn actually helped me write. I'll read one of them. But it's a series of poems based on a huge sculpture that one of the two buddies, they're both old college professors, retired, they were literature professors, so they throw around lines of poetry back and forth at each other just like they're hitting tennis balls at each other. But one of them's their sons is a student in art, and he makes this sculpture, and it becomes the metaphor for the book itself and the metaphor for a life spent in the arts. I think that's everything I want to say. My wife always tells me when I'm getting ready to do a reading, try not to talk so much between the poems and about them, Dave. The poems aren't dull. So, okay, I'll try to get me out and get to the poems. And I'm going to start off with the metaphorical poem as a beginning. It's the best way I know to start the book for you. The Monument. The son's name is Willie John. He was named for the two writers' favorite authors, John Milton and William Faulkner. So that's who the Willie John is when he says a poet you were named for once beneath the time sun. Okay, here we go. The Monument to the South Plains. Son, your mama, who is admittedly a hair-trigger weeper, walked all the way down to the barn to tell me she is genuinely and purely exasperated to tears with your sitting in here in your bed alone for 3 days now, wrapped up in divine and superfluous thought over God knows what, and that I should unleash and afflict upon you a stampede of accumulated wisdom in order to provide incentive and momentum for possible confession and redemption. Or, in other words, what in the hell is the matter with you? Your mama really wants to know the cause of your pestoration. Willie John said, nothing's wrong, Daddy. I have to make a project in indigenous sculpture for my physical art thesis, and I'm trying to come up with a mental design and materials with not a lot of luck so far I can speak of. Behold, a wonder, said a poet you were named for once beneath the time, son. Out behind that very barn where I have been piddling all morning rests a considerable bevy of red bricks and paving stones. Off to the starboard side, used cinder blocks and dead concrete forms. On the larboard side, a minor subaltern deity's ransom of worn-out farm equipment my daddy put out for years, wondering if there would ever be any use for it before the second coming or the Russian bomb. Inside that barn, 7 sacks of ready-mix concrete, along with arc and acetylene welders and even a soldering iron. I would be just as happy as a crow that found a drop plate of communion wafers if you could utilize that indigenous scrap material so it would seem I had a purpose all along for my years of unrequited salvage, separation, and stacking. You got any ideas about what it could be? No, sir. Now you go out there and stare at it for a while. If you need lessons on that talent, I'm available for instruction. I'll bring along a chair if it takes too long drawing up a mental plan of opportunity to endure and prevail, as the other man you were named for once said. Build your sculpture any way you want it, as long as it looks good from the kitchen window to your mama, as a monument for the rest of her life to your teenage years. And when you are done, we will call it the Statue of Limitations until a better title comes along. Now, anytime during construction you think it's gone wrong, give the word. I'll knock it down with the tractor. You can start again till you get it right. Willie John built 3, tore down the first 2, finally settling on a tower amalgamated between an obelisk and a Babel ziggurat, a spiral. And now I'm going to step out of the poem for a moment and say the images I'm going to give you now that make up this sculpture, every one of them comes out of a poem from Bill Clefcorn or David Lee. So they're found, and I just piled them up just because I wanted to. A spiral of plowshares, fenders, and motor covers, tractor seats and steering wheels, a corn planter, spring-tooth harrow and flat cultivator, manure spreader, deep trench disc cultivator and windrower, all manner of painted and rusting equipment conjoined, invisible in the warp and woof. The new body arose from a blood-red brick base, and a gathering of barbed wire strung against an open side, like it emerged from the skeleton of an overlooked and dying chthonic deity. An androgynous Texas god resurrected and ascending from the barnyard, straining against gravity's death clutch and his father's terrible acrophobia, grasping upward into nothing more than still air, building materials so heavy and bundlesome that at last Willie John devised and constructed a 58-foot derrick with a block and tackle pulley system to hoik up a John Deere engine block, a magically and technically impossible 6 feet above the rig, a great skull atop the megalith, a pair of steel irrigation pipes protruding like massive horns upwards from the sides. After the last heart-welled lightning burst, the final settling flame, the penultimate binding smear of cement, wrap of baling wire, spit and glue, he brought his parents to stand beside the barn and view the monument to the South Plains rising from the abandoned feed lot. And his father trembled. His mother wept as if she were viewing the birth of a new grandchild before the great sculpture soughing with the wind's movement, marking the pathway trace of light's footfall on the near horizon, a ripening field of cotton. Behind, knee-deep in the white foam of crop, 3 scattered pump jacks. They rise and fall like the distant shapes of migrant pickers working their slow way through the half-mirage. My Lord, he said, Willie John, that thing is alive. You're very, very kind. I hope these 5 poems will just run together as a single poem. So let's say that's the first movement. Here's the second movement of the poem. This is one of my little persona poems, a little narrative poem. I chose a short one for you so we don't have to worry about too much detail and too many Beowulfian digressions going off. This one is, well, it's set way back in time, and you will know that when the fellow picks up a phone and the operator says, "Number, please." I don't think that's happened in the universe for about 60 years. I remember it. I don't know how, I'm only 39, but in any case. This is the San Antonio incident. Jerry Ray Newman, on family vacation, ran half a block down the street to the closest public payphone when the operator said, "Number, please." He said, "Can y'all send an ambulance down here real quick? My mama, she's hurt pretty good." Can you tell me how she's hurt? Walking down the street, here come this big sow bitch jalapeno pig with babies. Her being a fleshy woman, she couldn't run as fast as the rest of us. It caught her and mauled her real bad. She's a-bleeding like a sieve on that one leg. What is the location? It's right down the street from the motel where we're staying at. Can you give me an address? What's the address, Daddy? He says it's 4th Street and Rhododendron. Could you please spell that? Wait. Hey, Daddy. Okay. We'll carry her piggyback up a block to 4th Street and Fur. That's F-I-R. She's hollering in an embarrassing manner, Daddy said. Could you ask that ambulance to get here in a hurry? I'm going to read one dedicated. Sergio, wherever you are, this one's for you. And I'm saying that because there's some Spanish in this poem, including a sort of a seamy Spanish word in it. And I would prefer him to translate it, I think, rather than me. But we'll see how it goes. This is another one that this is in the pickup. This is out on the road. And the title of the poem is Lost in Translation, a monologue from the pickup cab. And this is Billy, the protagonist of this book, looking back on his lifetime to his years when actually he was about your age, and the love affair that could have been, the one that every one of us at this age look back on. And just, it's wonderful to be this phase of life because we can look back and see perfectly clearly with absolute brilliant perfection of meaning all those events from our youth which never actually happened. And that's part of what storytelling's about. So we're looking back into that youth, and it makes reference to back in the 50s and 60s, movies were such an important part of our lives. We don't say things like, "I remember where I was when the atom bomb went off." No, we say, "I remember exactly where I was when Charlton Heston spread his arms and parted the Red Sea." I remember when Elizabeth Taylor let Montgomery Clift throw her down in the sand and on the beach, and we didn't get to see them finish what it was, but boy, we knew even then, yeah. Well, this is about the teenage ingenue movie of the time, and the big movie stars, which are mentioned in the poem, but they were Troy Donahue and Sandra Dee, and they had been in a movie called A Summer Place that every teenager in America fell in love with. Well, this is after that fact, when Troy either becomes just a scoundrel or a bigamist. Lost in translation, message from the pickup cab. That year I'm thinking about, the popular bubblegum set in Italy movie of the season had Troy Donahue having overthrown and tossed away Sandra Dee with the summer morning garbage, a venal and moral sin of an unforgivable nature to the unsophisticated and uninitiated post-pubescent likes of moi, in which he, courting unabashedly Suzanne Plachette, I believe, and whilst so doing used the term au-delà, Troy translated as beyond the beyond. That being, I suppose, a Swahili or Reformed Egyptian term of endearment, certainly not Italian or technical romantic upon finding the current operable teenage love of a lifetime. With such linguistic power, it secured an immediate, and for some young Republicans, lifetime addiction to that expression, so that, true story, every Texas girl's 1962 high school annual was signed all de la by the current or aspiring suitor, to which there was a clamor of, oh, this is why she gave me Kleenex, a clamor of tear-struck, emotional overthrow at any female suttee gathering of the clavern for purposes of stratification, alignment, of eternal phylogenitus, commitment with an expiration warranty of 1 June, some assembly required, by all those, both signed and unsigned, in that manner. Which, oh my, directly leads me to the matter of contemporary, reflective, personal poignancy. Ergo, my undeclared adoration that very season for the Senorita Bonita Eva Sáenz, to and for whom I refused usage of au-delà, already in my self-proclaimed maturity deemed trite to the shaven rimrock of cliché. Whereupon I cast about for an appropriate, foreign, exotic, and to the 10th power, romantic term of endearment. But, having poor personal macaronics in my equipage, I, by force of choice, turned to a source of higher wisdom, which and whence I trundled to my good friend and her brother, Gabriel Sáenz, who suspected my infatuation with the lovely Eva, and queried him for the exact Spanish or Mexican poetic maxim I should use to win her undying love for a lifetime. Upon which he told me, not te quiero, as that profession must come much later, after I had secured her heart, but that the te and familiar tense would certainly create an atmosphere of reciprocity. Therefore, after a long 8 seconds spent in heavy ponderation, he opined, I will give you an amorous expression steeped in the art of courtly love, Andreas Capellanus notwithstanding, guaranteed to create love's flight straight to her soul. But you understand, these words must never be spoken in daylight, and always whispered, sotto voce, softly and distinctly into her ear. As I recall, he said something like that. And I said, fine, give it to me right now. I'm primed. And he said, in a loving voice, gently murmur, tú eres una pendeja. All right, some of you didn't get it. Sergio, come up here and tell them. That is the worst possible thing you can say to a Latino. The denotative translation of that word, and I probably shouldn't even say it out loud, but it is a college audience after all, and certainly you've had some botany or biology or zoology. I doubt there's anyone, no, there's three of you can see now who don't know what it is, but you can ask the person sitting beside you. The word actually translates as pubic hair. And that's that's not something you really want to say. Guys, that's not a good thing. All right, never mind. You can read the poem. Tú eres una pendeja. And your words will strike her heart like St. Teresa's flaming arrow of lightning. Perhaps the truest statement uttered on this planet since the Sermon on the Mount. As Eva, upon hearing my love psalm, turned directly and with her soft hand folded into a love knot like she held a roll of dimes for tithing, smacked me a lick whose smiting resounded as thunder to shake Mr. Milton's throne of heaven. It was 2 years before she spoke to me again. And a year after that, before I found out what her son of a bitchin' brother invoked upon me, an event perhaps seminal in the focus of our lives. How, perhaps all for the better, as we were doomed at best to be star-crossed lovers between eras of acceptability. And now, with Andrew Marvell's winged chariot at my back, I can only turn to my favorite poet, the marvelous Mr. Mims, for solace. It was love lost and a year lost of the few years we account most. Truly, beyond the beyond in the language of recuerdos and adoration, a mental hiatal hernia. That being pretty much all I have to say on that subject for the time at hand. So I'm going to ask you not to ever bring up that tragic matter again. Just drive the hell on, paisano. See if you can find us a back road where we can stop to bleed our lizards and then carry on toward the coming of the night. Well, they drive. They end up back at Adolph's. And this is a poem, one of my former students read it and told me she hoped I would never give a reading from this book without reading this poem, because she said in some ways it's the very heart of the book and it's the closest I ever came to actually capturing Bill Clefcorn's voice. Well, I know there's one person in here who knew him, so I'll have to ask Ron if I did okay. This poem, however, doesn't come out of Bill Clefcorn or West Texas. It comes out of Paraguna, Utah, where Jan and I lived for 13 years. This poem deals with the ultimate authority in any conflict, any argument, any matter of business, any matter of ethic or morality. Evocation of this source supersedes the book of Leviticus, or scientific postulate. Any discussion in Paraguna going in any direction that's going to bump heads, the first one to step out of the discussion and say, well, they say, it's done. Argument is over. They say is the ultimate authority in the universe. Don't you ever forget it. All right. What they say. When Larry Joe Williams invoked them that evening at Adolph's Bar and Cafe, Billy Clogthorne rose like Lazarus from his stool to begin walking with a purpose away somewhere else. To which Larry Joe said, "Where are you going? I ain't finished yet." So that Billy said to Larry Joe, "That's what I feared. But you gave me prologue excuse I sincerely desired to the point of prayer." "Which is what?" said Larry Joe. "The invocation of an element of imagined society named they, which does not, has not, and never will exist, but whose ultimate authority referenced gives imprimatur to proceedings from nonsense through hyperbole to authentication by summons of the universal arbiter, who will allow the invoker to propound ideology he does not comprehend and thereby create pretense of knowledge, emanating from those invented sources he actually on this earth never encountered, nonetheless feels perfectly qualified to repeat verbatim those elements, these ethereal geniuses of his imagination who, incidentally, always happen to agree exactly with him. Think, believe, and say to an audience of one." And Billy, rising, sauntered in search of elsewhere libation, to which Larry Joe Williams opined, "What did he say just then? Does any of y'all know what that was about?" So that Ollie MacDougall summarized, "Larry Joe, to the best of my knowledge, he said, they say you are full of crap. And if that's what they say, I believe it has to be a fact. And that, Larry Joe, is exactly as they say, all there are to it." Well, that gets us back to Adolph's. There's a long scene in Adolph's I do not have time to read. Billy gives his farewell speech to life. It's a beautiful speech. Quite incoherent, but beautiful. And the people who are standing with him talk about it. "What'd you think, Ollie?" "Well, I thought it was pretty good. What all of it I understood." "What about you, Clovis?" "Well, I thought it was a stay thou art so fair moment. Glad I asked for it. In the words of the prophet, I believe we heard something almost being said. Oh, I could get drunk enough to shed a tear over that one." "No. Tears are salty. You have high blood pressure and can't tolerate it. Besides, it's all gravel road leading to mere oblivion. Let's go home." "I like it. saith all but Jacques. I'm about ready to, Billy. Let's call it a quit and get it over with. Last call. Poem has an epigraph from the two saddest words in the English language. Bill Clefcorn and I used to play games together. Most of you in here are too young to remember there was a TV program called Name That Tune, and they would say sort of what the tune's going to be, and then the two people who were competing against each other would say, well, I can name that tune in 6 notes. I can name that tune in 5 notes. I can name that tune in 4 notes. Name that tune. And then they'd play 4 notes and you'd see if he could actually name it. Billy and I would do that with words. And this came up one night. What are the saddest words in the English language? And we started at 10. And finally, Billy, about 4, he said, all right, we're ending it right here. I can do it in 2 words. I thought it would be one of those 7 2-word expressions that start with F and Y or something like that, but or G and B or something like that. And he came in when I said, "Okay, name that expression," and he said, "Last call." Well, okay, maybe so. Tonight, moon glow from within. Softly, like a candled egg. And softly, stars diminish until incandescence washes the dark sky, until midnight's light slick. Its ebb and flow, liquid. The candent universe rolls softly. Midnight remonstrance. There are those I wish only to remember, being gone and only memory. And there are those I wish to never remember, desiring only their presence, lasting as long as my life, until forever. As I cannot imagine living in a world containing only their memory. And you, my friend, whom the gods call into that other alone, wherever you wake, be it desert or forest, mountain or seaside, find tinder, dry moss and kindling, flint, strike a small fire, which, being eternity, will flicker beyond forever. Sing your bright poem, fork your lightning dance. I will find you sooner than later, wherever you wait in darkness. We will sing together, delirious and off-key. We will tell great lies to shame the heavens. We will cook with wine. I promise you this. Well, there you go. Okay, I've been told to leave a bit of time. How are we time-wise, Celia? Wow, 5 minutes. Questions, comments. I need all of you to know this. Jan and I reared 2 kids through adolescence, through their teenage years. That means I have a proven status of accepting interruption, argumentation, correction on a minute-by-minute basis. I have the thickest skin of anyone in this room. You cannot get under it. Try. So any way you want to react to anything I've done, I'm here for you. Questions, anything. You don't want me to sing, you don't want me to strip. I'll clear the room fast if we do that, but otherwise, anything can go. Anyone? Please. Good. It's a really good question, especially for a college audience. How did you first get your work published? Start close to home. If you don't have a literary magazine here, and last time I was here you had a very good one, start right here. Start with your local newspaper. If they don't have a poetry column, go to the newspaper office and say, well, why the devil not? Yeah, I'll be happy to edit it, as long as you'll publish my poem in it first. But start that way. Start small. F.W. Shoemaker's book, Starting with Small Things. Start small, start local, and it's a little bit like throwing the pebble into the pond. It'll spread the ripples. Pebble's gone, but those ripples keep going on and on and on. So that's the best way I know of. Get lucky, get real lucky. If you write something that's fairly decent and get it published, because people really do read these things, the publications. If you're really lucky, you'll have editors start writing you, asking you to give them your work. But that's the best I can say for now. I wouldn't advise any of you in here, the first poem you've written, send it to the New Yorker or Poetry Magazine. But if you feel like 32-cent stamps or whatever it is now, go ahead. But you're better off starting small. Otras personas? Please. How did you make it onto an all-black baseball team? I had 2 mothers. And my second mother, the mother who actually liked me. My mother always, even when I was born, she wasn't sure I was her son. We sort of grew up estranged against each other. But my second mother was Miss Leela. She was a black woman. We loved each other very dearly, and one afternoon, it was about 4 o'clock, she called and said, Mr. Dave, you got your spikes in your car? She knew I did. That's where I kept them. I said, yes, ma'am. She said, well, get in, start it up, and drive on down here to the field behind the airport. I said, hey, that's the black ball team. That's the Blue Stars. I can't come down there. Oh, my, I just meant to tell you, I don't believe I'm going to be able to make it back to do supper. Oh, yes, ma'am, I'm coming. And that was the first day, and it was probably, I wasn't a gifted athlete, but that was probably the most fun I had as an athlete in my life. My favorite memory of my childhood, which really may be true, is going to Tahoka for a Juneteenth doubleheader. And I usually only played in the home games. They weren't sure about taking me out on the road. This time we had to. Both Anderson boys had hurt themselves that day, and they were going to need my knuckleball, needed a relief pitcher. So we drove in, got there a little bit late. Coach said, get them spikes on, get them on. He never let us wear our shoes in his car. Not going to mess up my floorboards. So we had to get them on. He says, he's going to try to start this game without you getting warmed up. Now you get out this car, you start throwing. You just throw everything you got. I hold him off. So he leaned, we all got out, started throwing. He leaned over the top of the car with a little piece of paper like the one I dropped, licked his pencil and looked out at us like he had never seen us before in his life, trying to figure out how to organize a lineup for the game. And the other coach came straight over to get it started, but the whole time he's walking here, he's staring right there at that one guy that doesn't quite fit in. And he leans down on the other side of the top of the car and looks at that list for just a minute and nods his head, and then he points straight at me, and his exact words were, "What is that?" And my coach, without doing anything other than looking up and following his point at me, and looked like he'd never seen me before, and he licked the pencil and put his head down and he said, "Oh, it's an albiner." Yeah. Yeah, well, when you grow up that way, you know, that's why you become a writer, I guess. Yeah. In lieu of good memories, I have fond memories. Right. We're running out of time. Anybody? Elliot and Prufrock says, do not ask the overwhelming question. Go ahead and ask it if you got it. Well then, thank you very much for letting me come back to your school. It's a wonderful, wonderful school, and what an edifice. And I'm just delighted you let me come here to do the kickoff of my new book. I'm honored. Thank you.